Hi and welcome to the Excel Hub. Today we'll learn one of the most important Excel concepts, cell references. And by the end of this video, you'll understand the difference between relative and absolute references and why adding a few dollar signs can completely change how your formulas behave. And here I've got a simple sales table with products, units sold, and a target per unit as well. Let's start by calculating the total target value for each product. We can type equals C3 times D3 and press enter. Now Excel returns the units sold multiplied by the targets per unit. Instead of writing that formula again for each row, I'll drag it down like this. Notice how Excel automatically updates each one. For example, the next row refers to column 4, the one after refers to column 5, and this one here refers to column 6. And that's called a relative reference. The formula changes relative to where it's copied. The row and column both move automatically, and it's great for repetitive calculations like this. Next, let's say I want to calculate a bonus for each product, 5% of their total target. Instead of typing 5% in every row, I want to refer to it in cell I3, as you can see. So I can type equals E3 multiplied by I3. And before I click enter, I'm going to add absolute references or dollar signs around both the column identifier and the row identifier. This way, when I drag the cells down, you can see that the total target is relative, while the bonus rate remains static. So the simple rule to remember is dollar signs lock a reference. Let's now consider an example of locking only part of a reference using VLOOKUP. And here let's say we want to extract the units sold and the target per unit for a given product. To do this, we can use the VLOOKUP function, which looks up a value and then returns a corresponding value. And before I start, I'd like to emphasize that VLOOKUP is a more advanced function. We'll cover this in detail in a later tutorial. So the main purpose of this is to demonstrate the use of mixed references. We type equals VLOOKUP. We first select the lookup value, which is the product apple. We then select the table array. We're looking to retrieve the units sold as well as the targets per unit. And the lookup value is found in column B, and therefore we select these 3 columns. Then it's asking us for the column index number. In other words, in which column is the value that we want to return. And since we're looking to retrieve the units sold here, this is not in the first column, but it's in the second column. Now, one way we can approach this is to write the number 2, and this will tell Excel to retrieve the value in the second column. The other way we can do it is to make it dynamic, and we can use the column function for this. And here, if we select B1 as an example, it's going to still retrieve the number 2 because column B is the second column after column A. But it's going to be dynamic. So in other words, when we drag this across, it will refer to column C rather than column B. We can then type false as we want an exact match. Now, before we click enter, we need to add absolute references. So we're going to add a dollar sign before the letter B here, which locks the column. So when I copy this formula across to the next column, Excel still looks for the product name, but the row number isn't locked. That's why it can still adjust if I copy the formula down for another product. We're also going to completely lock the lookup range. So in other words, the table array. And we can do this quickly by using the F4 key. Now the lookup range is completely locked, so Excel always searches in the same table. The column number remains dynamic, as we want it to move to column C when we drag it across. And this is therefore an example of the mix reference. Now we can drag this across and down. And as you can see, it always refers to the right product. It always refers to the same range. And then the column identifier is dynamic. And we can test this out, so we can see that 120 indeed corresponds to the unit sold for Apple. 2 is the target per unit. And then these two values match the ones for beef. Now, to better test the target per unit, we can change one of the values. So if we change the value here to 3, you can see it adjusts here as well. If we did change the product to, say, milk, you can see this updates automatically to return the unit sold and the target per unit for milk. To summarize, relative references mean both the row and the column move when copied. Absolute references mean nothing moves, in other words, $ in front of both the column identifier and the row identifier. And a mixed reference means one part stays fixed, the other moves. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it useful, and subscribe to the Excel Hub for future Excel tutorials, techniques, and examples.